But honestly, when you told us we wanted to get together and talk about this is what I was hoping to see, like this shit. But I didn't think for 1 minute I'm going to be sat here calling out the wrong shirts.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have got Ben Houston, who is the owner of Back 4 Brand Protection. So a company you may not have heard of, but who does incredible work. So in front of us today, we've got an assortment of shirts. Some of them are real and some of them aren't. So a big deal, and Ben's job is related to protecting brands against counterfeiting, and obviously protecting you as the consumers, and also the people and some of the dodgy practices that go on within the counterfeit industry as well. So Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your background and how you've ended up doing this?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in brand protection for 20 years. Started at Manchester United, then worked at Nike, and 12 years ago set up Back 4. And we now represent, I think, 85 football clubs' brands. Wow. To tackle the issue of counterfeiting and brand abuse, really. That's in a nutshell. We're working with law enforcement agencies to try and tackle the issue of fake football shirts, or at least suppress the issue, but it's extremely challenging environment to work in at the moment, certainly.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a really interesting one, because I think there's going to be loads of viewers out there that are like, well, what's the matter with a fake shirt? You know, when you think of what the prices are for replica shirts nowadays and some of the kits that are being churned out by some of the big brands, it would be really interesting to find out what actually goes on behind, you know, the creation of some of these fakes, basically, because I know as a designer, you know, I'm not overly comfortable with it, you know, because I've spent a lot of time researching and investing my time and energy into it. For someone just to come along and rip that off, it kind of, let's be brutally honest, it pisses me off a little bit, if I'm brutally honest. But I would love to hear a little bit more behind, you know, what's going on with these fake companies, if you like. What is the issue? Why can't people go out and just buy fake product?
Well, I think there's 2 points. In terms of I suppose the size of the issue, the counterfeit trade is probably as sophisticated as the official trade. You know, right. They tap into technology. You'll see from these examples, they're getting the best fabric, they've got the best machinery, they're replicating things, certainly so consumers wouldn't find out. So that's that part. In terms of why it's wrong, well, it's a criminal enterprise, ultimately, and surely we don't want to be involved in criminal enterprises. It takes money away from clubs. Some clubs are reliant on merchandise revenues, so fakes impacts on that. And I think from my point of view, a bit about what you touched on morally, it seems wrong to me that in your industry, you know, you've spent years developing your craft, spending time designing something fantastic, and then someone in China takes a week, rips you off, and floods the market with inferior products, which then damages, you know, brand image, reputation, that type of thing. So, yeah, but it's as we'll see from some of these samples, the quality is very good, and certainly, I think majority of consumers wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Yeah.
Well, it's so you say that then, so I get that, and you know, I get a little bit upset that, as I said, people are taking my designs and replicating them. But if I think of a family of 4, right, you've got 2 kids and a dad and a mum that's going to the football. If you're buying a Nike or an Adidas kit at the minute, they're around about the £75 to £80 mark. That's a lot of cash to spend on a family of 4, man. Yeah. And if you think they may not just be buying the shirts, they might be buying the full outfit. So can you kind of justify why people are going down this direction?
Well, I can't, because obviously I work on behalf of the brands to try and put a stop to this. But I think with the cost of living crisis, it's very difficult now for people to afford multiple football shirts. I think the other slight argument you could say is football shirts now, there's a lot more involved and put into the shirts in terms of technology and that type of thing. So you could argue there's a slight increase because of technology. Mm-hmm. But it's tough. It's a tough environment, isn't it, for families? And from a very selfish point of view, my job is to work on behalf of these clubs and brands to protect their sales, and that's what I have to do. But it's we don't get much sympathy, when we're doing our work and trying to tackle this issue because of the huge difference in price between the official and the counterfeit items.
Yeah.
And why is there such a huge difference in price? Because you've talked there at the beginning about the quality of materials that are being used. The workmanship seems to have improved a lot over the years as well. So why is it that a counterfeit brand can sell products so much cheaper?
Well, they can sell things cheaper because they don't have to go through all the red tape, I suppose, that established brands have to, in terms of royalties, paying taxes, etc. So they cut corners a lot in terms of that. In terms of obviously factories and living conditions and wages, obviously they don't have to pay standard wages, that type of thing. In terms of why the official shirts are at the price they're at, unfortunately I'm not the expert to tell you that, but there seems to me like there's lots of stakeholders involved in the shirt, whether it be the federation of the team, the kit manufacturer, the sports retailers, and I think they're all involved commercially to some extent. But the counterfeiters, I mean, it's an unregulated industry, isn't it?
Yeah.
They can do it as cheaply as they want. They don't have to adhere to any
Well, they're cutting
standards.
out all the middlemen, aren't they?
Yeah, so I mean, this is what happens with an illegal enterprise. They don't do things by the books. They don't pay people what they should, etc. etc.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to touch on because, with working in the industry, we know what you've got to go through. So just a simple thing, we've got the Brazil 2002 kit that we worked on. And if you've seen any of our videos, which you'll see up here in the link, we talk about, it was a whole thing called massive colour. And I remember as we went through the process of trying to get this fabric dyed, which the fabric itself was quite unique because it was the first time we went to a stretch woven. The time it took us to actually get that colour dyed in what we call colour fasteners. Now what that means is a colour fastener, when you put it in a washing machine, the idea is it gets washed hundreds of times so that it keeps that colour the same. And that's just one of the tests that we put these things through. Now, once we've done that, you're basically giving the counterfeiters basically the finished product for them to go and effectively just rip off. So you're almost giving them the solution. So that's, again, one of the reasons why I find it a bit of a struggle that, we've spent ages, it took us nearly 18 months to bring that to market, like all the technology and everything that we put behind it. So I can kind of sympathise.
I think certainly on social media, when I've inserted myself into conversations about counterfeit versus genuine product, I tend to get the response back of most of it's made in the same factories, or the brands are using sweatshops anyway, so what's the difference? And neither of those things are true,
That's absolutely not true. It's absolutely, and that's funny because we used to get that a lot when we worked at Nike. And I remember, just a quick story, we were in a pub and I was actually with a guy called Phil Dickinson, and the two were just sat there having a quiet pint, and for whatever reason the word got out that we were from Nike. And then we got bombarded by these two girls and they were absolutely tearing strips off us, saying, how can you work for Nike, slave labour, all this sort of stuff. Well, actually, if you draw back the curtain, Nike actually puts so much, and you know this yourself, Nike puts so much money into making sure that their factories are actually really well maintained, the staff are really looked after. Whereas you're right, a lot of the places where the counterfeits are being done, it's forced labour, it's child labour and everything. And it's effectively, I mean, you were quite diplomatic about it earlier, but I'll say it, they're gangsters, a lot of these people.
Yeah. I mean, the proceeds go to fund drugs, guns, human trafficking. There's a lot of impact to this that's beyond just how much profit is being taken from a football shirt compared to...
Absolutely.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Do you want to learn from two veterans who've designed football kits for Brazil, Italy, Man United, Barcelona, you name it? If you want to learn from us, sign up today for our courses, Spark Design Academy. Come on, get signed up and get in front of those big brands right now. Well, it would be interesting. One thing I am intrigued to see now if we may, Ben, is I'd like to spot the difference with you.
Yeah.
So if you can grab a couple of kits and we'll have a look at them and see if we can spot the difference.
Yeah, well, I think these are nice ones to look at. These.
I was kind of hoping you weren't
All
going to
right,
start
okay.
with them ones.
Well, there we go. This is
I'm worried now.
Yeah, so these are the Brazil shirt for the last World Cup.
Yeah.
So you're the expert. You design a Brazil shirt. You should know.
Yeah.
What are we thinking?
Right. Straight off, that's the original. Straight off the bat. Yeah. Definitely. Please tell me I'm right.
It's not.
I think it is.
It's not.
I kind of hope I am wrong. No, I think that's the original, definitely.
Oh, I don't. My 2 reasons for thinking it's not is I don't think that's the right Kimball tag. I think it's too thick and plasticky
Let's have a look.
compared to what Nike would actually use.
I
From
think that's
memory,
the
I think they
original.
use a thin black one. And then also there's a misprint on the badge a little bit there, but I don't know if that's just because of the way it's been.
Yeah, I see. So come on then, put out the
We're
measuring.
going to have to have a quick look. Let's have a look.
So if somebody at home is going through
Yeah.
the same process, they've bought this from wherever or are about to, what do they need to look for?
Well, if he's got the swing tag on it, that will help. So on the swing tag there'll be a style code, and then inside the shirt there'll be a little white label which also has a style code. So you want those style codes to match.
Yeah.
If they don't, like this shirt, it means it's a counterfeit. So that's an easy thing to look for.
Right.
So it is fake.
Yeah, another little tip which is good if the swing tag
Is it
isn't-
fake?
This is a fake. Yeah.
Get lost.
Another little tip which I tell people is if you look on the care label and there's ever any scribble or writing,
Yeah.
that's the best indicator ever. Because what basically happens in the counterfeit trade, they have these big piles of labels that they're basically writing on when they send them across to be stitched. That doesn't happen in the official trade. That's not, don't scribble things on labels. So you notice this one's got a light little pencil mark, and actually probably a lot of these shirts have got the same indicator, so that's a good thing to look for. But this is a really good copy.
I mean,
the fabric is
absolutely amazed at
phenomenal.
that.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And even, where the swoosh is applied and stuff is pretty
Wow.
pretty good.
I mean, that is bonkersly good. I was convinced that was going to be. My God. So these are 2 replicas then, right?
So this one,
That's got to be the
let's have a
original.
look at these 2. So
You even get a spare button. Yeah, that's got the...
you've got a little bit of scribble on there.
Well, at least I've got that one right then.
So the quality's good. It's difficult to tell, but from my point of view, there's always something. They always make a mistake somewhere. They're lazy sometimes.
Well, that's not quite in the middle either. So something,
Have I got that one
working
right
at Umbro, something that we used to do that wasn't, it was on items where we'd got the woven label in the back instead of a heat transfer. And because the counterfeiters we were finding would always try really hard to make everything perfect, our woven labels had a missed stitch in the back.
Okay.
So it was always an error that was in exactly the same place. So, because one of the other important things for brand protection is as stuff's been shipped around the world, customs officials need to know whether it's genuine product or not. They might stop a shipment, and so they want a really easy answer as to how can I tell if this is your product or not. And so those are the sorts of indicators, because if it's not, there isn't something easy for a customs official to tell. It could just sit in the...
I think I've got that one right. That's right, isn't
Yeah,
it?
so that's your genuine, yeah.
So here's an interesting thing. That button isn't centered either.
Oh wow, look at that.
They've both gone for this piece underneath, haven't they, to kind of protect the button.
Creates the
But even the
Brazilian
button,
flag.
even the button is quite close.
Yeah. And you get a spare.
I mean, honestly speaking, I'm gobsmacked at that. I genuinely thought that authentic game day
Yeah.
was... And now you've mentioned the black Kimball gun, you're absolutely right.
Oh, there we go.
Wow, that's interesting. Right, and next one. I don't want to do another one now. Can you do an easier one
Well,
next?
we've got. I know you.
Yeah, mate, you can have that one for
I know
future
from one of your
reference.
previous shows you like the Crystal Palace shirt from last season.
Yeah,
We've got a
that's
couple
right.
of those.
Number 1 last season, that was.
It was. Oh, Christ.
Check out.
Right, I've spotted the snide already.
Oh, don't do what I did. I went straight in there.
I think it's also worth pointing out for consumers and fans out there, we're in a luxury position that we have a genuine and a
Industry
fake.
experience.
So we
Yeah.
can, we can.
And we've got the industry experience. With the deepest respect, it's, we know what we're looking for, whether it's stitch count, whether it's different types of rib textures, but yeah, I would probably say that's the fake. And the reason why I'm saying that is because they've not captured the detail on the bottom. But honestly, I'm really scared to see anything now.
Well, I spotted that as soon as I pulled it over, so the armhole doesn't match up.
Yeah.
And it's quite nastily put together. I think there's a difference.
There's
in
two
the
different
fabric as
fabrics,
well.
yeah, because it's kind of perforated on the back
and
of the
I think
one.
the armhole on this one, it's got like a little mesh insert in it.
But you've got none of that detail, look,
Yeah.
which is arguably one of the nicest details on the kit.
I mean, it's interesting as well that they've still used the eco fabric label.
Yeah.
And presumably counterfeiters aren't really that arsed about the environment.
No, a lot of the official shirts at the moment are obviously made with recycled plastic with the environment in mind. The counterfeiters definitely aren't bothered about the environment. So.
Yeah, even the badge.
Whoa, look at that.
I mean, that's almost like a game day version, like a player's version versus the replica.
Yeah, but I mean, look at this shape of it. I mean, it's a bad enough logo as it is without getting it wrong.
But even the shade of the product looks a slightly off shade. But you're right, from 100 yards, you'd struggle to recognise.
Well, I think
that.
as well, I mean, even if you did, part of the decision-making process is, am I happy with it? Is it good enough for what I'm prepared to pay? If you're on holiday and this is 30 quid, and the one at home, I know Macron don't charge the same as some of the other brands, but if you're faced with a choice of, well, there's a 30 quid one here, and in the pub nobody's going to tell any different.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It then comes down to it's the moral thing. It's like the shopping trolley conundrum.
But that's a far better. You're getting far more for you. Even if that is 30 quid, I'd still rather pay the extra 20, 30 quid to get the proper badge, the proper fabric, all the details
Which I
on
think's
it.
all right if you're in a position to, but and I'm not creating an argument here to be in favour of counterfeit shirts. Quite the opposite. But I can see why people are attracted to doing it. What the appeal is to them, because 40, 50 quid difference is a lot of money in a lot of people's pockets.
Do you think, Ben, one of the challenges that we have is the fact that the football teams and the manufacturers are releasing so many kits? Because back in my day, you would release a Man United kit, it would be a home kit, and that would stay for 2 years, and then they'd release an away kit. And they'd so every season, the fans were still getting the opportunity to buy a new kit, but the kit they bought the previous season would last longer. When we're not really seeing that many teams, I think Brentford maybe has gone down that direction. Do you think that's having an impact on it?
Well, there's obviously demand for that there as well, isn't it? That's the thing. People are buying the shirts. There's obviously massive frenzied excitement around football in general. So that obviously stimulates why there are so many releases of shirts. So I suppose the way to reduce that issue is not to buy all the shirts, or to only buy one shirt a season. But it doesn't help. But also culturally, everyone wears football shirts, don't they? All the time.
Yeah.
It's a fashion item as much
Well,
as
it
showing
certainly
your
is
allegiance,
now,
isn't
for
it?
sure.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
the other thing, I sit on the other side, I suppose, but in terms of football shit, if you buy the genuine article, the amount of times you can wash it and the length of time it lasts, is there a product out there that is as durable as an official football shirt?
As long as you don't put it in the tumble dryer or use fabric softener.
Or if you buy from Castor. Sorry, guys.
Controversial. That's if it's got all the badges on to start with.
Yeah, it's true. So, well, here's a question, right? Everybody who's out there, you tell us, would you rather your team release a kit every season, home away, third Champions League, or would you prefer them to go back to one every 2 years? Tell us what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would encourage the conversation to go to is, would you also be okay if in the summer your club didn't quite sign so many players or lost some of their better players, because they couldn't afford to give them a pay rise? Because that's some of the other reality is with football now being dominated in each country by a small cluster of clubs, a lot of the bragging rights is who's got the best new kit and who's spent the most on players. Mm-hmm. So.
But here's an interesting thing. So we talk about fair play, right? Why isn't there fair play when it comes to football kits?
In what sense? What would that look like?
So if it would look like, so it's not just up to the brand. So if the federations grabbed a hold of it and said, right, you're only allowed to release X amount of shirts over a certain period of time, you wouldn't have a situation like Napoli, for example, that I think the last time we counted it was 36 shirts they did last season, which is just bonkers. Obviously, they will not have sold many of all of them, or maybe they did. But the point is, well, why isn't that considered? Because surely that's advantageous to the likes of a Man United, a Man City, and so on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see it from one side. I guess the flip side to that would be the smaller clubs would be at a disadvantage. So like Crystal Palace releasing a shirt every season gives them that injection of cash, albeit not as big. If I think of a club like a Villa or an Everton, it would take them 10 years to sell the number of shirts that Man United sell in 1 year. So, you could say to Man United, right, you can only release a new home kit every 2 years, but that'd still be 3 million shirts, or maybe more if it's going to have a 2-year life cycle. A club like Villa can only sell every 2 years, and that's 300,000 shirts, so they've lost proportionally a lot more revenue. So it's a really complex situation in terms of, I would love, because the other thing to factor in, I guess, is that unlike Apple release new iPhones all the time, but you have really got a choice there because most people aren't an Apple supporter, so with your new shirt, there's more of a psychological tilt towards, well, I've got to have it because it's the new shirt, so that's harder on the fans as well. A lot of fans, and particularly kids, will feel, I've got no choice. It's the new shirt. I can't have the old shirt. I've got to.
It's very emotive.
I've got to have it. Yeah. So it is a really complex thing. I think the other thing that's interesting beyond just how many shirts every season, and we've got an example here, is as vintage shirts have become more popular and therefore more expensive. I mean, there's something here. We talk about 80 quid for a replica. I mean, an original one of these in great condition is fetching well over 100 quid.
Well, I think this is where the counterfeiter has benefited most, because the counterfeit hits this sweet spot in that Newcastle can't fully reproduce a shirt because their relationship with Castor.
Yeah.
But nothing's stopping the counterfeiter.
That's a really good point.
Fans want the 90s, they want Ferdinand and Shearer and Keegan. They want that nostalgia. And they don't want to buy the version the club do without any kit sponsor on it either.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's where the counterfeit has really hit a sweet spot. Last 3 years, the trade in retro is ridiculous.
And both selling them as, at a normal price, and selling, passing them off as if they are old shirts.
So if you had, if you had
profits.
if you had a genuine one of these with swing tags and everything, you're probably talking 500 quid. Mm-hmm. This is like 25 quid.
Yeah.
So, and also from this era when you two were working, these are iconic shirt designs, aren't they? I mean, especially this one with the collar.
Oh, damn me.
So it's the
That's
retro.
like a frisbee, though.
Yeah, that's going to give you some nipple rub, that one, isn't it?
Totally. But
God.
the irony being that the collar fabric's a lot softer than it is on the real one. But yeah, I mean, we've heard it quite a lot just through conversations we've had in the community where people have bought what they believe to be genuine vintage shirts and paid a fortune for them, and they've arrived and either it's very obvious or they can't quite tell whether it's real or fake.
We get some stuff and from 30, 40 years ago, and it'd be amazing if there are that many of them in circulation, full stop. So straight away the price is hiked up, isn't it? and certainly not in this pristine condition. If you've had it for 30 years, it's going to...
Yeah, it's going to be in a little bit more
A bit
battered
more
like
creamy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite incredible, that, actually. Because, again, the fabric on that is really quite decent.
Well, they've got all the modern techniques now, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, so when they're replicating them, they're using all the modern techniques, all the fabrics, whereas it's probably a bit more tricky in these days.
Well, and
producing
the
systems.
scarcity of the originals as well. You're not very often going to be in the position to be able to compare the two. Anyway, maybe if you had this as a kid and you've still got it in the loft, you might be able to look and compare the two. But if you'd just shown me that, other than me knowing, you know, well, the collar's too soft on it, I wouldn't have been able to tell you if the original fabric was as meshy as this one is, for instance.
I think if you wore that at any Newcastle United game, I think you'd struggle to tell that that's not an original. Yeah. The only thing that really gives it away, I mean, obviously we know the neckline, as Rob's pointed out, is not the same, because that was arguably one of the things I remember about it, simply because it was almost like a rugby jersey. And I always remember the twill that was on there. But if you could feel this like I'm feeling that now, that is literally...
You can hear it.
I mean,
don't need to feel
it is so hard. It's almost like cardboard.
Yeah, microwaved it onto
So
the shirt.
you would notice that, but again, from a distance, really tough, man.
It's difficult.
Really tough.
If you want to design football kits for a living, even if you don't have a degree in fashion or graphic design, this could be your chance. Go to sparkdesignacademy.com today. So what does your company do, Ben? Do you produce security labels, or do you advise on what's going on in the market? So what if I was a football club, what would you do?
Nothing in terms of like the security devices and holograms. That's something that kit manufacturers do and the clubs do. We basically work with law enforcement agencies, police, customs, trading standards to identify cases of fake product and then conduct action, seize product. Right. We do that in the physical space, you know, on markets, retailers, but also online. So the online is where the crux of the issue is at the moment. You can get anything online. A number of marketplaces, social media selling this sort of thing. So it's about removing content, finding individuals who have stock, conducting action again with the police to try and reduce, suppress the issue, but also send a bit of a message out to tell people it's not okay. You know, if you're going to sell this product, you're going to get a knock on the door from the police, that type of thing, to, I suppose, reduce the issue.
So there's two more, maybe three more I'd like to talk about, because we brought in a Villa top, which we were absolutely waxing lyrical about, and it's not necessarily about this particular manufacturer, it's more about the badge that they've had on their product. And again, if that's a fake product, I mean, they have done an absolutely tremendous job on that badge, because the amount of detail that's on that is quite incredible, really.
Yeah. I mean, that one's feels a bit stiffer than this one.
Let's have a look at that.
Like if I was looking at whether this was a fake or not, something that, and I don't own either of these shirts, I would expect that thread inside should be dye to match and not white. Feels like that would be a bit of a giveaway for me. So dye to match means it's the same colour as the fabric that's been sewn together.
I mean, I would hope that that's not a fake, because that again is so close. I'd struggle to. The fabrics look spot on.
The other thing from a construction standpoint on this one that would mark it out to me is within the hem there, where you've got what's called a cover stitching, you can see that it's not completely covering all of the...
Well, it's also been cut really badly as well.
So it's been cut quite badly, and there's dyed to match the thread where they've done that, because it's visible on the outside, the inside it's white, but otherwise it's not well made.
The construction of that's not that great, but...
So is this real?
This is a fake, this is real. But actually I brought this one because I think the quality of the badge is unique for a counterfeit. Ordinarily, you just get a sewn-on patch as a badge, but actually there seems to be some sort of rubber within the badge there.
Yeah.
And even if there was that, you'd expect it to be flat rather than as detailed as that is.
So it's not bad. This was kind of the first version of this as well. What you tend to find when the shirt's launched, initially it's a decent standard and it just gets better and better because eventually they get hold of the genuine thing and just take it to a factory and say replicate that. So the Counterfeit will try and get this out before the clubs have launched the official thing.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen some of that this summer where some websites are popping up on social media where fans have gone to look and say, oh, this must be the new away shirt. It's already available on this dodgy website.
Yeah, and the problem there is the clubs don't want to confirm it or deny it either.
Yeah.
So you're in that limbo, and the fans think, "Oh, I've got a genuine here. It's just not been launched yet." Yeah. So again, that stimulates demand, you know.
And it's clearly not just the big clubs. I mean, we've seen it with Crystal Palace. We've seen it with Villa. I think is that a Brentford one as well?
I mean, we get every Premier League club shirts copied. We work with a lot of Championship EFL clubs. I'd say 90% of the Championship clubs.
And this is fake as well?
That's a fake, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can see there's a lot of bleeding on the, and the logo is not being lined up properly.
The label's caught too far into the hem, into the seam. The hem is, I would guess, too shallow compared to...
Obviously, international shirts, very popular.
Well, that takes me on to my next story. So we've got, obviously, a kit that's very dear to my heart. And my son actually has a very similar shirt to this, which he bought off a company on the internet, which we'll leave anonymous for the sake of the conversation. And he was convinced that it was a standard shirt that Nike were knocking out. So I did a bit of research. Clearly, Nike have not reproduced this at all. Now, obviously, this is really close to me heart because I designed it. And then, you know, when I've actually got into it, I was almost questioning myself, thinking, I can't remember doing it like that. I'm sure I didn't do it like that. And then it was only when I got the actual original jersey, which I've just recently bought, and on this one, obviously the first thing that steps out, the replica would have been slightly different from, in fact, was it? I'm not 100% sure it was. I think we did use the woven fabric in the replicas as well. So even the fabric isn't right on this. But the colour is the first thing. The colour's not right. And then there's a cutting detail there at the back, which obviously from a quick manufacturing perspective is way cheaper than the way that it's actually been designed. And we've got darts in the back, which I remember putting in. And then the neckline for me is the big giveaway, because we put a slightly different, really teeny rib on the inside of that, whereas that's just been bound around the top and it's been really clumsily done. But honestly, when you told us we wanted to get together and talk about this is what I was hoping to see, like this shit, because then I'd be like, oh, I can sleep easy at night. But I didn't think for 1 minute I'm going to be sat here calling out the wrong shirts.
Well, with this shirt, how long did it take you to design this from start to finish?
From start to finish. I mean, I joined Nike in 2000, and Tina Grace, Eddie Harbour, Phil Dickinson, Colin Line, all the guys that were, you know, kind of aided within the design of it. I ultimately designed it, but they were doing a lot of the research, and that was 6 months before I'd even got to the business. So when I got to the business in 2000, we were already talking to what we call the Advanced Innovation Technology part of Nike, which, you know, they'd been talking about how we're going to tackle it. And then the first project I had to do was with Tina was jump on a plane and go to Tokyo in Japan. And the reason we went there was to figure out how we were going to create the technology. So what was that? So say 6 months, so let's say it was 1999, and then it was released in 2002.
Yeah. So I mean, so much hard work and innovation.
Oh, absolutely.
And cost and expense.
100%.
Obviously, the Counterfeiter takes them about a week.
Yeah.
Does it annoy you? Does that not annoy
it does annoy us because I think there's two things that annoy us. The first thing is, obviously, they've copied it. And the second thing is they've copied it, but they've done it really badly. And it irritates us a little bit where, you know, it would be great to have seen that come back, but if it could have been done by the actual manufacturers, because if you remember the Nike ad that was released, they had all these kits in there,
Yeah.
and I think Nike could have jumped all over that. And you know, they've got their reasons as to why they didn't. And I'm not trying to, you know, be disrespectful. You know, I love the brand, but I just think there's ways of maybe stopping some of this stuff themselves, which is give the public what they're after. You know, so there's a little bit of an argument there as well. But yeah, I mean, it does irritate us. But we were talking about this off screen. It's an interesting one because in my career, we've had people who've been counterfeiting our products, which we know. Even when I was working at Nike, we were coming up with products that, at the time, I think it was a bathing ape, had basically taken one of the iconic training kits that we did, and they replicated that literally like for like. And instead of the Nike swoosh on there and, you know, the club crest, it was a bathing ape logo and, you know, all their stuff. But I thought that was pretty cool because it was bathing ape. So yes, they've still counterfeited, they've still copied my design, but the way they did it, it was almost like they were paying respect to the design. But it was still a bit weird, I have to be honest. And then fast forward a number of years later, I then went to China to work for a company called Li Ning. And I always remember I said to them, look, you know, the idea of this role is to take you as global, but one of your best-selling trainers is a direct rip-off of a Nike product. So I was like, well, how on earth are we meant to sell that globally? I said, it's been bought and sold for the last 25 years, so how do you expect to do that? And it's interesting that I don't envy you, man. There's so many grey zones in your world, which is like, where does it start and stop? And we talked again off camera about the whole Rolex world. You know, the demand to try and get a Rolex is so bad now. You cannot walk into a Rolex store and buy a Rolex. So surely that's creating supply and demand for other opportunists.
Well, Rolex is interesting because there's demand for genuine Rolex, but also demand for counterfeit, high quality counterfeits as well, isn't it? You know, so yeah, I mean, in terms of like creativity and inspiration, how people are inspired, there's a bit of a, I suppose, a grey area surrounding that now. And you'll see a lot of the big sports manufacturers are constantly suing each other for design infringement. You know, I think now they're a lot hotter on that type of thing and looking to prevent other companies. But then you'll also get these great collaborations now between sports and fashion brands.
That's right,
You know, Gucci and I think, Adidas and that type of thing. So they've obviously spotted that opportunity, the kit manufacturers, and thought, oh, well, we can do that ourselves, let's do it. But it's interesting what you say about this, because if Nike were to bring this out again, obviously you'd be pretty proud that it's out there again and people would buy it. And I talked about the sweet spot counterfeits have with retro. And they do normally, but if you think about Manchester United and Arsenal, they're both now back with Adidas. So that means they can bring out all their 80s and 90s shirts, which has been great for them, you know, and kind of reduces the counterfeit trade a bit, because I think the majority of people want to do the right thing and invest in the club and in the heritage and history. But it's very difficult for, you know, obviously Newcastle got to deal with Castor now. Castor aren't going to say, yeah, you do the Adidas version as a, you know, it's a tricky one, really. Yeah,
it is. It's been absolutely fascinating, Ben. It really has, and thank you so much for coming down and having a chat with her. I'm still embarrassed that I couldn't pick out that Brazil kit, but
I'm sure it won't be mentioned in the comments at all. So don't worry about that. Well, yeah, thanks so much for tuning in today. We would love to get your thoughts on it in the comments in terms of all the things we've talked about. It's, you know, it's such a wide-ranging, complex issue to deal with. So, you know, I think the more that we can discuss it, the more we can understand about what prompts people to buy it or the reasons why people shouldn't buy it, the better. I think that one of the important things to consider is it's not just about the dollars and cents, you know, how much it costs to buy the fabric and sew it together. You know, that's only a tiny fraction of what goes into the creation process when it comes to a football shirt or any other high value item for that matter. If you want to learn more about what goes into that creative process, then go to sparkdesignacademy.com, where you can sign up for one of our courses and learn from the two of us as to how we've gone about creating for some of these teams over the years. We also have a Patreon channel that we would love to see you there too. So every month, exclusive content behind the scenes, and you get a monthly call with myself and Craig where you can ask us exactly about issues like this. So only remains to say thank you so much for tuning in again. We hope to see you next time. Until then, like, subscribe and tell all your friends. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, man.
Right.
That we can put on, or like we did earlier with the ads,
Yeah.
and do a quick introduction again, like, hi, we're here with Ben, and this is what he does.
Don't
If you
tell
wanna
me
hear
that's
more from
fake.
him,